All right. There we go. All right. Oops. There we go. Welcome everyone to the Creating and Sustaining Successful School Partnerships webinar. My name is Heather Starks. I'm the past president of Minnesota PTA, the current Family Engagement Commissioner for Minnesota PTA, and I'm also serve on the National PTA Family Engagement Committee. And I'm going to have my co-presenter Amy introduce herself as well.
Hi, I'm Amy Nelson. I'm the current president of Minnesota PTA, and I'm the past Family Engagement Chair for Minnesota PTA. And so I'm really excited to be here today and help you learn about these standards.
All right, so if we can go to the next slide, the goals for today. All right, so when you leave today's session, we hope that you have a broad understanding of national PTA standards for family school partnerships. So we are not doing a deep dive today. This is just going to be kind of a level setting so everyone understands what these new family school partnerships are, the standards are. We would like for you to identify up to 2 strengths and up to 2 areas of growth for family engagement in your district or in your school. We would like you to identify PTA resources for implementing family school partnerships in your district or in your school, and learn more about how Minnesota PTA supports local units, because that is one of our big roles here at the state level. Next slide. So assumptions for today. So when we use the word families or parents or guardians or caregivers, they're all interchangeable. We're just talking about the adults that are responsible for the students. So we're not intentionally leaving anyone out when we say parents or when we say families. We mean all adults that are in the child's life. Diverse families refers to all areas of diversity: race, ethnicity, culture, religion, family structure, socioeconomic, physical, or mental challenges, anything that encompasses a diverse family. Family engagement looks or occurs at many levels and looks different at every school. So what's going to work for your school community may not work for the school community literally down the street. Every school has their own unique culture, and you need to know that. And that's why the family school partnerships are a framework. And then you within that framework can see what works best for your school. It's not one person or one organization's responsibility. This is a partnership. That's why they're called family school partnerships. It's a partnership between administration, teachers, support staff, parents, families, community, the broader community, business community. Family engagement is everyone. And we are all here to learn, to share, and to grow. Amy, do you want to take this slide?
Yes, now that I've figured this whole thing out.
Okay.
So why family engagement? So multiple studies have shown that family engagement matters and that it's dynamic. It's always changing, and it is changing to fit whatever needs the schools have, because not all family engagement is equally effective. And you will find that we really talk a lot about engagement and empowerment. So different levels of family engagement. So that is one thing where we're looking at effective family engagement. Children are far more engaged in their education, because their families are far more engaged in their education, which, higher test scores, better graduation rates, better self-confidence, and better social skills and classroom behavior. Generally, because, you realize that if the parents are involved or the families are involved, then the kids will be more involved. And so part of what when I started with being the family engagement commissioner, which is a very fancy word, but National PTA was working on their initiative for the Center for Family Engagement. And this really, though it isn't as much as it should be, but this is where families are, right? PTA. I mean, we've been around for the longest advocacy parent-led organization in the country. And, Center for Family Engagement proves that. They invested in research. They're trying to create programs that emphasize well-being for every child. I mean, our vision and mission, every child, one voice. And then they're trying to get those resources out to all of our families through our PTA community. Heather, you want to do this one?
Muted. So the family national PTA standards for family schools partnerships first launched in 2008. So they've been around for quite a while, but they revitalized them in 2022. So they were starting to look at revitalizing them prior to the pandemic, but the pandemic really highlighted the need for us to take a look at these family school partnerships and see which standards needed some tweaking, maybe related to more virtual options for family engagement, because we knew that families often couldn't be physically in schools, but we still wanted them to engage in their community. So what were some virtual options that could still support that? It's got more of a equity lens in it than it did in 2008. Not that it didn't in 2008, but it's a stronger diversity and equity lens, and you'll see that in some of the questions and the standards. And so it's just the similar framework. You'll see if you knew it before this, the 6 standards, the big standards didn't change. Those are completely the same. But everything else kind of inside is a little bit more deeper. They did this by interviewing administrators, teachers, support staff, and families, parents, leaders all across the country for about 1.5 years. So it's a very robust process, and the data for that, the research for that is on the website, which we'll share with you in a little bit. And so you can see kind of how they came to these standards and these options through all of that research. So these updated standards were designed for multiple audiences, but there's 5 audiences that they really kind of had in their head, like these are the audiences that we think are going to utilize this the most, and it's going to be the most strongest. And the first one is you. So it's for PTAs and other family community leaders who want to know how to support and push their schools to be better partners with the families in their communities. So that's why we're here, right, is to talk about this, but you're one of the main audiences. It also has families, educators, and young people who want to know, like, well, what questions do I ask if I want to know if my school has a strong family school partnership? Next slide. It's researchers, because like I said, they did a lot of research to come up with these standards. And so to kind of talk about looking at the impact and implementation of these partnerships, policymakers and private funders who want to invest in stronger communities, and then school district and state education leaders who wish to ensure that their family school partnerships are adequately implemented, funded, and monitored. And we gave this presentation to the Minnesota School Board Association earlier in January, and that was the audience we were looking at when we were presenting then. So our goal here at Minnesota PTA is for all 5 of these different audiences to be aware of and to understand these standards and to utilize them wherever they are in the education world. Next slide. So that's where you'll see these partner organizations. We'll talk about this webinar more at the end of the presentation, but you'll see that the American Federation of Teachers and the National Education Association, the 2 teachers unions in our country, are strong partners in this. The Principals Association, National Principals Association, the National School Board Association, and the Association for School Administrators, so like superintendents or cabinet level members. All of these groups are all in on this family school partnerships framework. And that is a really powerful thing, because it's not just parents saying we need this, it's not just PTA saying we need this, but it's all the organizations that support educators and administrators within the school system that are saying we need these partnerships. So if you want to follow along while we're doing this presentation, please go to pta.org/standards. And everything that we're doing is on this site. I really appreciate National PTA. They literally put everything on one page, so you can find everything. You're going to click a lot of links and it's going to take you various places, but for the most part, all the standards are on one page. So if you want to go there, you can follow along. Otherwise, all these slides will have all the information you need as well. All right, quick overview of the standards. So there are 6 standards. Those are the 6 hexagons that you see here on the side. Each standard has 2 goals. So if you look at like the yellow hexagon, that's standard number 1, welcoming all families, there's going to be 2 goals under that. And I'll go into that in more detail in a minute. Each goal then has 3 to 6 indicators, and the indicators are what we use for evaluation. So we take a look and we say, okay, so, we're under this standard, we're under this goal, we're looking at this indicator, and that is the thing that you use for evaluation. This will make more sense as we go, but this is kind of how it's structured. Okay, so on the website, you will see the document that's a standards overview. It has every standard with the definition of the standard, the goal, number 1, and then the indicators, and then goal number 2 and the indicators. And you'll see that goals are written as questions, which I really think is awesome. And then the indicators underneath help answer that question. And then there's a rubric that we will be looking at. We're not going to go into the rubric today because, like I said, this is not a deep dive. This is just an overview, but the rubric kind of helps you see where you are on a continuum. So there are going to be schools that already are excelling at some of these items for family school partnerships. And at the same time, they'll have some areas that they're emerging. And like I said, you could have a PTA in one school district and just down the street, another PTA in the same school district, and they're emerging, progressing, and excelling. Areas are all going to be different. So the rubric says, like, are you emerging in this area? Are you progressing in this area? Are you excelling in this area? You'll notice there's not, are you proficient? Like, are you done? There is no done, right? There's no we've done it, stamp it, move on. It's a continuum, and you can flow back and forth on them. Okay, so I'm going to go into the rubric just a little bit more detail. So this is what one of the pages looks like. I think if you go to the next slide, Amy, is this where it? Yep. Okay, here we go. So at the top, it'll show you, it'll also say standard number 1, welcoming all families to the school community. And then it gives the definition of what that means. Then the next slide will show you, then you've got the goal, which is the question. And then you have the indicators. Remember, there's 3 to 6 of these. So for this particular standard, we're looking at the indicator, learn about families and foster respectful attitudes. And then you'll see emerging, progressing, and excelling. So emerging, when you read those sentences, if that's true for your PTA, then you're in the emerging column. If those things are true for your PTA, but you're beyond that, then you're going to go to the next one and look at progressing. And then if you look at that one and you say, yep, we're on both of those, then you go to excelling. So progressing is everything in emerging plus the items in progressing. And then excelling is everything in emerging and progressing and in the excelling column. They build upon each other. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go through the standards and the goals. I'm going to take 3. Amy's going to take 3. And I want you, as you're going through this, to start identifying what strengths your school has and what areas of growth you may have. We encourage you to stay within similar themes, because what will happen sometimes is a PTA will look at these standards and they'll see, one thing from welcoming all families, one thing from support student success, and one thing from sharing power, and then try to address those each within the school year. And that's a challenge, because you're kind of attacking things in different areas that maybe need different resources, maybe need different timelines. So we kind of encourage you to maybe group them into similar themes so that when you're working toward a goal, some of the things that you're working towards can address multiple standards, multiple goals, or multiple indicators. All right, Amy, I've done a lot of talking. Can you start this?
I was just going to say the same thing. Yes.
Okay.
So standard number 1 is schools treat families as valued partners in their child's education and facilitates a sense of belonging in the school community. So this is one of those where you kind of say, well, this totally makes sense. Aren't we doing this already? Well, to varying degrees. And so what this allows us to do is to really look at that whole picture. Because remember when we talked about how different types of engagement is effective and some is not so effective. So we talk about inform, involve, engage, and empower. So all of those things are very important. I mean, if parents don't know about what's going on when we're informing, then how are they supposed to, you know, involve, even show up for anything? And then if they're not showing up for things, how are they going to engage? And if they don't engage, then how are we going to empower them to advocate for their own students? So this is one of those really important things. And as an aside here, I'm going to say this is a very important part in our 3-to-1 rule for PTAs, where we are an advocacy organization, not a fundraising organization. So for every one fundraiser you do, you should be doing 3 other events or gatherings that build a sense of school community. Now, does this mean that you have to take a loss? No, but the point of it is not to fundraise. And that is something that often gets lost when we're talking about engaging all of our families. So, as I said, build a community of belonging. That kind of goes with that 3-1 or that 3-to-1 rule. So, but even more so, are we respecting all the differences? Are we understanding and connecting to the school community? Create an inclusive environment. Are we varying what we do? Are we doing things as we've always done them and not making room for new ideas and new cultures and a new diverse family? These are all questions that we need to be asking ourselves. So goal 1, we have the indicators, and then emerging. Learn about families and foster respectful attitude. So these are some hints that you can do if you're looking at them to just kind of start, how can we even start here? And then progressing, it's like, okay, well, maybe we're doing 2 of the 3 for emerging. So what can we do next? So, these are things that you can ask yourself. So the why protocol, the personal why do people want to be involved? That's just an example for this one. And then excelling. So it's the emerging, progressing, and then excelling. So we're not going to be talking about our why. Why do we want to be involved? But now we're going to be talking about, why do we want to build this strong family at our school? Why is this important? And as Heather said, all of these are available on the website too. I'm just going through and highlighting a few different topics. Standard 2, I'll do this one too, Heather, if you're okay with that. So the school supports staff to engage in proactive, timely, and 2-way communication so that all families can easily understand and contribute to their child's educational experience. So remember when I said inform, involve? So inform at that point in time is just getting the information out. It's 1-way communication. Really, when we talk about effective family engagement, it's when we have that 2-way communication that is working so families can feel comfortable contributing and feel that their opinion is valued as well. So exchange information between school and families. Everybody needs to be in communication. The number of times where, we do something and we're like, well, that was a fiasco. Well, most of the time it's because things aren't communicated properly. And to facilitate parent-teacher communication. Do the school and PTA promote communication? Do they really emphasize that? And an important thing to remember here is, as a parent or as a family with a child in the schools, your first point of contact should be that child's teacher. It's not effective to jump over that teacher because, especially if the principal is going to say, well, have you talked to the teacher? And if you say no, they're going to say, well, you need to talk to the teacher first. So that's one of those things where just facilitating that communication is so important. And then the school builds, oh, no, we're on 3. Sorry.
That's okay.
I thought I could just keep talking forever.
We all could, right? Because we know this. So could you do me a favor? Can you go back to one of the slides with the rubric? I don't care which one. Yeah. So if you're reading this, you might be going, all right, wait a minute, this isn't a PTA's thing, because if you read, so like train and support all teaching staff to have relationships. Well, PTAs don't train and support your teaching staff, right? This is why this is a partnership between the PTA and the administration, between the PTA and the teachers and the support staff, between the PTA and the district level leadership, because it's going to take all of the players in education to be working on this to make this effective. So the PTA's role is to say, we have this framework that is research-based, that involves all of the different players in, and the PTA can say, we value this, we think this would be good, how can we work together to come to these goals? Okay, so I didn't want anybody reading that to be like, wait a minute, this isn't PTA language, or it's not PTA roles. You're right. That's why it needs to be a partnership with your administration. Amy, anything to add?
Yeah, I heard the best line this weekend, and it was, it takes a village, but I am not the village. So the PTA is not the village.
Yep.
You know, you have to have every part functioning to kind of create that community.
Right.
So
great. Okay, so go to number 3. Sorry, I just wanted
that's
to
okay.
touch on
We're
that.
good. No, I'm glad that you did that. So I'll let you do number 3.
Okay, so number 3 is to support student success. So the school builds the capacity of families and educators to continuously collaborate. So you heard Amy talking about the continuum, the inform, involve, engage, empower, to support in students' academic, social, and emotional learning. So they're all kind of tied together, right? If you have that two-way communication, the one that Amy just talked about, this continuous collaboration is much stronger, it can happen as well. So you go to the next one. So these are the 2 goals under support student success. So the first one is team up for student success. Are families, students, and educators on the same page about how students are progressing? So I know this happens sometimes, is that parents will think, oh, my child is totally on track for reading, or my child's really struggling in math. And then when they communicate and connect with the educator, they find out that actually the opposite's true. Either they're really actually doing quite well in math, or they maybe are actually struggling in reading, but the family's perspective is different. So having that communication, having that collaboration to make sure that everyone understands what is truly true for the student, and for the student, depending on their age, right? Sometimes also knows where they are within their progress. And then the second one is support learning by engaging families. Are families valued partners in their children's learning at home and at school? And this is kind of a cultural thing within the school, right? Do you as a parent feel valued in your school community? Do your opinions, are they heard, and are they valued? Do they matter? Are you able to connect the learning that's happening at school and bring it home, and vice versa? So these are 2 of the the questions under the standards, or the goals for support student success that are important. If you think about conferences, this is a big one here for these 2 goals. And the two-way communication in the first standard is also a critical piece of these 2 goals. I'll do number 4, Amy, and then I'll cue you up for number 5. So standard 4 is speak up for every child. So if you know the national PTA tagline, it's every child, one voice. We at Minnesota PTA and we at National PTA speak up for all children, whether their parents are PTA members or not, whether they are part of a PTA school. Every child is valued in our system. And so we speak up for every child. So the school affirms family and student expertise and advocacy so that all students are treated fairly and have access to relationships and opportunities that will support their success. I think one thing that I learned, so I'm a school board member in my community, and one thing that I learned is throughout, especially the pandemic, was lived experiences are never wrong, right? It's what that family and that student's lived experience has been that is valuable to them, and making sure that the schools affirm those experiences and advocacy so that everyone is treated fairly. So here are the 2 goals for this one. Navigate the school system. Are families knowledgeable and able to raise questions or concerns about their child's educational experience? This is especially critical for families who may not have had the same educational experience growing up as their children are now. And so understanding like, well, how do you navigate the system? How do you find out where your child's grades are? How do you find out when conferences are? How do you find out about, well, it's raining here in Minnesota on February 14th, which is weird. But if there was a school closing due to weather, how do they know about that? So like just making sure that the families are able to navigate the system and are able to raise questions or concerns about their educational experience. Do they know who to contact? Do they know who the important adults are in their child's life at the school? And then the second one is to, oops, sorry, Amy, is to address inequitable outcomes and access. Does the school and the PTA remove barriers for families to be advocates for and with students, particularly those who are most marginalized? And here from a PTA perspective, this is where you can look at your own PTA practices and make sure that you don't have any barriers for families to be advocates in their school. So what time are your PTA meetings happening? Where are they happening? Do you have a virtual option for families that may not be able to be there in person? If you are in person, are you in an equitable space? Usually that's like the library of the school. Are you able to offer childcare for families that need to bring their children to your meetings? Do you offer your communications in multiple languages? So really from a PTA perspective, this is where you can look at your own system and remove barriers for the families to be advocates, but then also asking your school to do the same. All right, Amy, I'll let you do this one.
All right. Share power. This is an important thing because it shows that when Heather was talking about like an equitable space, like somewhere that everybody can have access to, this is kind of that. I mean, in the way that, the school partners with the families in decisions that affect children and families together. As a team, they inform, influence, and create policies, practices, and programs. So if you immediately are starting out something where you don't have an equitable space, like you're holding your meetings in the principal's office, I mean, automatically that's going to put something, it's going to affect that balance of power. So having it in a neutral space is going to help you share that power because it's going to put everybody on equal footing. And school partners, they're going to work with the families and the decisions that affect children and families. An important thing to remember here, before I go to the next slide, is everybody gives their input, and just because they don't go with your idea, quote unquote, doesn't mean that they weren't listening to what you wanted and what you were saying. And so that is one of those things where maybe it's not the exact plan that you had, but you shared your power, you used your voice, and it influenced what the final decision was. So that is what it means when we talk about a shared power, everybody working together. So strengthen the family's voice and shared decision-making. I don't know about you, but I have seen so many new, like, hey, can we get parent input about school time, start times? Can we get parent input about the calendar? Can we get parent input about what kind of social emotional learning we were doing in the school? So these are all things that they're wanting to have that family's voice and hear from as many people as they possibly can. And the best way for everybody to be engaged in this is to build those family connections. Because if you don't have that relationship, then chances are you're not going to be completely honest about what you're wanting to do. So the broad-based organization is, developing relations across school leaders, public officials, business and community leaders, and Standard 6 speaks even more so to this. But just kind of being able to have those conversations about what's going on. Because how many times have you had a conversation with someone who maybe doesn't have school age children or has kids at a different school than you or a different level than you, and you say something and they're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that was happening. Well, it's just having that communication and that being empowered to have that conversation about what's happening. Heather, do you have something to add, or are you just teeing up?
Well, both.
Okay.
So one thing about goal number one, so like Amy was talking about, like when school districts are asking for input on like school start times, hot topic, right? So I have heard though parents say, well, I'm not going to fill out that survey because they're not going to listen to me anyway. Okay, that's a problem. So then we need to go back and say, okay, which standard, because I think it was either standard 3 or 4 that addresses, do you feel valued does your voice feel valued? So if you can't, in goal number 1 here, say, yes, we're giving parents offer or families ways to partner in decision making, but they're not taking that advantage because they don't feel like their voice is going to be heard, you need to go to a different goal and work on that instead to make that foundation, so that when families are given the opportunity to give feedback, they know that their feedback is going to be utilized, if that makes sense. All right, I'll go to number 6. Oh, go ahead, Amy. You want to?
I was just going to say, it's all about trust and relationships.
Yep. Well, and okay, so trust relationships. So really it's the families that then do participate, seeing that their voice is being heard. Now, it does not mean that if what you ask for doesn't happen, does not mean that your voice was not heard, right? And I think that that's a balance that schools and administrator and school districts really try to say is, we heard you, we value what you had to say. Here is why what you're looking for may not be possible. It might be financial, it might be the timelines, it might be staffing. Goodness gracious, staffing in school districts right now is really challenging. So we might not have the staff to put that together. So it's just, but it's the school district saying, we heard you, this is what we heard, this is what we're going to try to do in that way, but here are maybe some reasons why we can't in other ways. Okay, number 6. So the school collaborates, it's collaborate with community. And this is where Amy was teeing me up for this, because the goal for standard 5 talks about these, the broader community being part, and that's where standard 6 is about. The school collaborates with community organizations and members to connect students, families, and staff to expanded learning opportunities, civic service or community services, and civic participation. There we go. So goal number 1 is to build a strong foundation for community partnerships. Does the school and the PTA have a plan for when and how to engage community partners? So in Minnesota, this is most, I think, broadly seen in the community school model. So if your school district has one of those, you know that that's where, like, for example, dental services will come into a school and they'll be able to offer dental services to the students in the school without them having to go out and find the dental services for themselves. It's where maybe mental health services are offered within the school system and the school community, so that families don't have to navigate that system on their own, and the students don't have to leave the school building to receive those services. We've seen some, I'm focusing on health, but we've seen schools that have put medical clinics inside their schools, and they can offer things like immunizations or strep tests, like this kind of small pieces of medical offerings to their schools and to their students. I know we've had some schools that have had laundry facilities in their schools. So it's, how do you connect with the community partners to say, this is the support that our students and our families need. How can we offer it either in the school building, or if it's not in the school building, how can we connect our families to the resources outside of the school building so that they know how to access them? And then connect the school with community partners. Do they work closely with community organizations, businesses, and institutions of higher education? So this is an example of where businesses can help support an initiative that the school might want to be offering, either financially, or they can bring in volunteers, or they can bring in expertise. Institutions of higher education, this is where, like if you've got a community college or a 4-year college or a technical school in your community, how can you partner with them to say, what are you looking for in your future students? How can you help us with our school offerings to make sure that the students are ready for the next step? So it's finding those community partners within your school, within your district, within your community, and making those connections together. Because we know that the stronger that the community partnerships are, the stronger that the school is, and the stronger that the community is. All right. It's gonna be your turn. Now, since we're recording this, I think we're gonna do this a little bit differently. I'm just gonna give you some time when you're at home watching this recording for you to do this activity. So we won't be doing the virtual sticky note piece in this here, but so what we wanted you to do, if you mentioned it, remember at the beginning, I mentioned like, as we were talking, as Amy and I were talking, if you were like, oh, yep, all right, I've got 2 areas of growth that I've identified for my school, or I've got 2 areas that we are like rocking, right? That I want you to identify those. So find a piece of paper at home, find a sticky note if you have it, and look at the standards, which is gonna be the next slide. I'm sorry, the goals are on the next slide. Standards, goals, indicators, rubric, thank you. Take a look at these and say, okay, as I was listening to this webinar, what are some things that we are really strong in? And where are some places that we could have areas for growth? And I'm gonna make you stick to just 2 on each. Then I want you to start thinking about like, okay, what does this mean for us? So pause this webinar right now, because we're not gonna wait for the 5 to 10 minutes of silence for you to do this. So pause this webinar, write them down, come back to us, and we'll go to the next steps. Okay. So having unpaused the webinar, you can go to the next slide, Amy. So it's kind of hard to have a discussion in a recorded format, but if you can find some common themes, some strengths, and some areas for growth in your school community, that would be good. Go to the next. Okay, so let's talk about next steps. So take what you learned today to your PTA and to your school administration. So bring, go on the website, print off whatever you think would be valuable, send a link to an email to your principal, send a link to other people in your PTA community and say, take a look at this. We think that we should be doing some of this in our schools. So bring it back to your PTA and to your school administration. Determine your individual, so meaning your school's next steps for utilizing the family school partnerships in your framework in your school. So it could be something like, hey, PTA, let's go through this as an organization. Maybe executive board takes a look. Maybe if you're a smaller PTA, your entire PTA takes a look. You take one of your meetings and you say, we're going to go through this and we're going to together identify some areas of strengths, areas of growth and some strengths that we have. Your principal should be in on that conversation, have them take a look at it, ask if they would do it with their staff in their building too, and then come together and say, okay, do we have some common themes? Do we have some places that we think that we can agree on? And then we're gonna go through some resources here in a minute to support your school then in moving along that continuum. Remember, it was the emerging, progressing, and excelling continuum. We're gonna give you some resources to help you do that. Absolutely contact Minnesota PTA if you need support. We are here to help you. It's one of our favorite things to do. And then share with Minnesota PTA. We'd love to hear your successes and your challenges with this model. And I think that's one thing I really appreciate about National PTA too, is that they take feedback very well to say like, this is awesome, we love it, or these are places that maybe it could be improved. Just so you know, there are at least 2 states that I know of. I think there's probably more, but Georgia and Colorado both use this framework, this family school partnership framework at their Department of Education. And they have it as their standards for family school partnerships across their state. We in Minnesota don't have a framework for family school partnerships. I think it would actually be ideal. But until then, until we do in Minnesota, this is a chance for you to bring this to your schools and say, we really value this work. Okay, so then we're going to go through the resources. But again, they can be found at the same page, the pta.org/standards. Okay, so a reminder, there's this document that it's going to be a 1-pager for each standard. It gives the standard, goal, the standard, the definition, the goal, the indicators, and 1 page for each of the different standards. The next one's the rubric. And again, that's in more language with like a principal supporting or supervising their staff. So remember, just have that language in your head, but it's something that you can go through with your school administration. And then at the bottom of the rubric are sample goals. So there are things that you then, if you're going through the rubric, can say, all right, our goal for communication is, and there's like percentages, X percentage of families report that their child's teacher shares positive information about the child, right? So start setting some goals for your school. There's a webinar series for National PTA. We're recording this on February 14th. The next one is tomorrow, February 15th, but it's a 5-part series. The first webinar was in January. The recording's available. The next one is tomorrow, and they're going through each of the different standards in like a deep dive. So remember, I said that we're not doing that here, but they're going to be doing these on the webinar. So if you sign up for one of these webinars, you'll get signed up for all the remaining ones. But it's a chance for you to see and do a deeper dive with some of our national partners about them. So tomorrow's is on the standard Communicate Effectively. And then the one on, I think it's March 1st, is going to be then the third standard, and then it goes forward from there. School board policy. So this is something that we talked in more depth about when we presented this to the Minnesota School Board Association. But for you as a PTA, you know, if you want a framework or a standard in policy for family school partnerships, there's an example of what a policy would look like on the website, the national website, that you could take to your school board and say, listen, we would really like to have some standards for family school partnerships in our district. We'd like to have it in policy, and you can share with them what that would look like. There's a podcast. So National PTA has a phenomenal podcast. It's called Notes from the Backpack. And there is one. So if you, going back to the school board, if you're wanting to maybe put this into policy at a school board level, and the school board's like, okay, we don't understand how family school partnerships and policy go together. This webinar from someone from the Department of Education in Colorado, as I mentioned, they use it as a framework in Colorado. She gives a great example or kind of an overview of how those two things come together. So is a good one for you to send to your school board. I have to tell you, the Notes for the Backpack, just as a podcast in general, is amazing. So go on the website and kind of look through. There's a lot that are very specific to parenting and families, like parenting your middle schooler. Who are they? They kind of, they definitely change as middle schoolers, to talking about reading and the science behind reading. So there's a lot of different podcast pieces that you can take a look at. Amy, do you want to take these last few?
Sure thing. So back in November, our esteemed President Anna King, National President in Minnesota PTA, held a town hall with a lot of other, with our partners. You may remember this partnership screen from earlier in the in the presentation. So this is great to go back and watch this. It was the Department of Education, National Education Association, school boards. I mean, it was a great forum talking about what are some next steps in education. So I highly recommend going to watch that. You can find that on YouTube, on National PTA's website called Raising the Bar, or on their YouTube channel or on their website. So thank you very much. Here's our contact information. I'm just Amy N at mnpta.org, Heather Starks, Heather S at mnpta.org. And we are here to help you. As she said, do not hesitate to reach out to us and ask questions, or help for, look for guidance. We are here to help you. Heather, do you have anything else to add about this right now before I talk about convention quick?
No, I'm good.
Okay, I hope people have stuck around to the end and haven't stopped yet, because I'm going to tout our convention coming up in April of 2023. It's the 14th and 15th. We're having a birthday party. It's our 100th birthday. More information will be coming out, so watch our Facebook page or our website. Our website is just mnpta.org. And it should be coming up, there should watch there for information about upcoming events. So thank you so much for joining us today. And I can't wait to hear more about how family engagement is helping impact your PTA and your school.